Yo, this is Sparing Myself the Pain, a rundown of all the negative things that I'll miss out on by being a marriage free and child free woman. Let's get into it. Painful thing number one, death of a spouse. The issues with a spouse dying, especially suddenly, isn't just the loss of the emotional attachment, the loss of the friend, the loss of intimacy, but all the things you have to deal with after the funeral, still having to take care of the household, still having to go to work, still having to take care of kids, of course, if you have any, and having to put on a strong face and just carry on because life goes on, as they say. But I can't really imagine, losing a person who is such a, an anchor, so to speak, in your life, and then just not having them there anymore. They're just, gone. Depending on the way that they died too, what they died in a car accident, accident at work, heart attack, aneurysm, something like that, where they were healthy and happy, and it just, came out of left field and nobody saw it coming, as opposed to terminal illness or something like that when you've been given fair warning, like this person has months to maybe a year to live. At least you can prepare for it. You can make your peace. You can, spend that time that they have left making some positive memories. But for it to be sudden, to have your whole world, your whole life just turned upside down with no warning, it really does seem like a worst case scenario for me. Having to deal with finances, the loss of their income, which of course is why it's important to have life insurance. Yeah, depending on how much they contribute, that could cause a serious financial hardship if they were paying the majority of the bills, which is one of the reasons why I think being a stay-at-home mom is not a really good idea. You have men who make six figures a year, but they've got a wife and three kids at home and no plan in place for if he gets injured, sick or dies. The financial issues on top of legal issues, again, depending on how he died. If he died from murder or during a botched robbery or something like that, you'll have to deal with the police being in and out of your house, in and out of your life, dealing with lawyers, having to appear in court, having the whole thing just dragged on for years and years and years, and having those wounds reopened over and over and over again, depending on how long it's dragged out. And that court cases can go on for years and years and years. And that would just make it worse. It would make it hard to move on as far as, trying to heal the emotional wounds caused by the death and then trying to move on to a new relationship. If it's been 2, 3, 4 years and you want to get back into dating and perhaps take it to that next level, having court cases related to a violent death can make it hard to date or hard to have a social life, because you most likely would just not be a really pleasant person to be around, and it would be hard to fake being happy. And also, single parenthood. Okay, you have your spouse dies. Now you're left with a couple of kids to take care of, not just financially but emotionally. That's not something that kids are going to get over if they have a fairly positive relationship with their father or whatever. They're most likely going to be seriously traumatized by it. They will never recover from it if they are old enough to understand what death is. If they're babies, toddlers who don't really know what death is, they might not be as affected, and they most likely won't remember him if they are younger than like 4. But if you have older kids, tweens, teens, that kind of thing, any kids that are older than like 5, they are going to have a hard time dealing with it. And then you have to, keep it together and not fall apart and just crumble into a pile of tears every time they bring him up. And, they still have to go to school. It's possible that they're performance in school can be affected by it. So yeah, the kids will be sad, and that can affect their social life because people for the most part don't like being around sad people. It's unfortunate, but that's how it is. And it's possible that they could start acting out, like being defiant, being belligerent, and you don't want to be super uh aggressive on discipline if they do start acting out, because you could just end up making it worse. you know some people process grief in different ways. Some people become withdrawn and sad, and some people will lash out. And I expect kids under a certain age to be more of the lashing out type, due to being angry and feeling like, it's unfair. Why did my dad have to die? Why couldn't it be somebody else's dad? Because kids are kids, and kids are incredibly selfish. But yeah, and then having to deal with your own mental health as far as depression, PTSD, on top of any potential postpartum depression that might still be there. Worst case scenario, thinking of having a baby in the house that is younger than a year old, and still, going through all of the postpartum associated with that. Didn't have your husband just die suddenly, and so now you're stuck with, a baby, very demanding baby, and then having to deal with all of the things that come with the loss of your spouse. I know me, and I know that I would not be able to handle something like that. But this is just hypothetical. To say if, I did the whole married and kids thing, that something like that would break me. I wouldn't be able to handle it. I would fall completely apart because, you know, my personality just wouldn't allow me to bounce back from something like that. I guess there are some people who are able to function normally after, even though some that go and get remarried, and they're able to, just, get on with life. But I wouldn't be able to get on with life. If I found a man that I liked enough to marry, I would be like super, super attached. I mean, attached in a really unhealthy way, because I'm not a people person. I am a person. So I get like super attached. Like how Chihuahuas become super attached to just one person, and like they really don't like anyone else. That would be me. So having um my husband die on me is just not something that I would be able to recover from. I would just be single pretty much for the rest of my life. To kind of circle back around to the financial part of this tragic event, of course, is the possibility of having to downsize or downgrade your entire lifestyle. If you have a life that is dependent on two incomes, to suddenly only have one, the possibility exists there that you might have to sell your house, might have to sell your car or one of the cars, might have to move to, a different neighborhood, an apartment in a completely different neighborhood, or maybe even to a completely different, city or town with a lower cost of living. And then, having to move yourself and your kids away from the people that they are accustomed to seeing every day, on top of losing the husband and father of the family. It's like they've already been dealt this trauma, the kids. Now they have to potentially move away from their friends and from their extended family, all because of money. Depending on how much the life insurance policy will cover, and of course they will get survivors benefits. It might not actually be enough to maintain a very high standard of living. You get your life insurance payout. Spending all of it at once is not a good idea. It would be, to stretch it out for as long as the kids live in the house and try to save as much as possible, so that when they turn 18, they're just not immediately out on the street enough to fend for themselves. But yeah, having to, sell your spouse's car, their any collection that they might have, if they collect, what is it? Those little model cars that they put together, little Hot Wheels, Micro Machines, Funko Pops, um, band memorabilia, anything like that. If they have a motorcycle that they really love, you might have to sell it, and being conflicted about whether or not to keep those items for the sentimental value, but then having to pay to to store it all if you do decide to keep it. there's just a lot of things that you have to deal with after the funeral, and you have to deal with these things while being in a state of, emotional distress. uh I sort of kind of envy people who are strong enough to carry on, but then again I feel sorry for them for having to carry on, and I will just absolutely never put myself in a position to have to deal with something like that. Not ever. It's not worth it to me. Remember, your life is yours to live, and you don't have to explain yourself to anyone ever.